Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope you guys are having a good day. And thank you guys for joining. I am Zainab, an executive administrator in the Institute of Data Science and Biotechnology and a member of Gladstone's DEI Council. I'll be your moderator for today's event, which is the first of the relaunch of our Critical Conversation series. Critical Conversation started in June 2020 as a way to bring the Gladstone community together around important issues and expose Gladstonians to new topics that may traditionally not be addressed within the walls of our organization. These discussions are meant to encourage you to reframe or shift your perspective, and we hope you'll continue the dialogue outside this forum. Since the launch of Gladstone's DEI strategy in 2021, we have had several discussions about microaggressions, which are brief and commonplace sites of insults. We've even had previous critical conversations events that helped identify strategies to prevent committing them, but we rarely talk about ways to fight back against microaggression. Today, we have invited a special guest to discuss micro-resistance, a tool to empower you to cope with, respond to, or challenge microaggression. I know this discussion will be beneficial for both people who are targets and bystanders. I'm pleased to introduce Devin Horton, the Graduate Diversity Officer for STEM at UC Davis. With more than 11 years of experience in teaching and program development, she has a strong background in mentoring and student success. In her current role, she develops and implements strategies that eliminate barriers for graduate students and postdocs from historically or racially marginalized populations. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to add them into the Q&A section. We have set time aside at the end of Devin's talk to address your questions. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and hand it over to Devin.
Thank you, Zainab. I appreciate the lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. I am dropping in the chat a link to my presentation so you can follow along if you want, but also so you can reference it later because sometimes we do end up with a little technical difficulties with the videos, but I think we'll be okay. So just in case, you now have it. So I'm going to talk to you about how to identify and also how to survive microaggressions. So let's get started. So the goal is just to develop a strategy for responding to microaggressions before they occur, but also some tools in case you have to respond after they occur. So after participating, you should be able to define and identify some of the most common occurrences of microaggressions. You should be able to identify the impact and outcomes associated with the experience of microaggressions, and also identify practical techniques to safely and comfortably push back against microaggressions. So I give this disclaimer ahead of any talk that I give, particularly when it comes to how we impact, I just realized I had on one earring, y'all, sorry, how we impact folks who are from vulnerable and marginalized populations. So bear with me. It is not the job of the oppressed to enlighten or educate their oppressors. There is no reason to feel guilty about not wanting to engage in the extra, taxing, often uncompensated intellectual and emotional labor of educating people on their problematic behaviors. While it is a kind and generous thing to do, you do not owe it to anyone. You deserve self-care, and it is okay if for you that means not educating. What I say to that is I get paid to do this, that's why I do it, but if you see me on the streets, don't ask. All right. So what exactly is a microaggression in the first place? So according to Sue, a microaggression in part is a brief, commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignity. And this is whether it's intentional or unintentional, and they often communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative implications, and they feel like slights and insults to the person who is experiencing them. They are usually subtle. That's really important. They're usually unintentional. We'll talk about why that's important in a minute. And they are ambiguous. And what it feels like on the other end is a constant questioning of whether or not the thing really happened and whether or not the person is overreacting. Or whether or not you are overreacting, sorry. So I would like for you to drop in the chat, what do you think it means when we talk about impact versus intention? So if you noticed in the definition, it talks about unintentional, whether it's intentional or unintentional. What do you think about that? How do you relay intention versus impact? Feel free to drop some thoughts in the chat. I'm looking at the chat on my end, which I'm sure you can see now because I'm sharing screen. Okay. So people can have the best intention, but the actual impact on the person is most important. It can be traumatic and lasting. Very true. Just because you didn't mean to hurt someone doesn't mean that you didn't. Very good. So this is really important because in our society, and probably in any society, but particularly in the US American society, there's a historical set of wrongs that have been done to a variety of people, and they have obviously lasting impacts. But oftentimes we can get caught up on whether or not you intended to impact a person that way. And as has been indicated in the chat, impact is always more important than the intention. And the example I often give is if you consider a fatal car crash. While the driver didn't intend to kill the victim, the outcome of the driver's actions is the death of the victim. So in this case, you can clearly see how impact is outweighing intention. But this holds true pretty much all the time. And this is really a difficult thing for some people because oftentimes perpetrators of microaggressions want forgiveness and they want it immediately because they didn't intend to hurt you, rather than be focusing on the impact of their actions. They really want the forgiveness for the fact that they didn't intend to do this or to hurt you. So there are 3 types of microaggressions. The first is microassaults. Usually these are overt and intentional. So think snarky, sarcastic kind of remarks. It can be nonverbal as well. It can be environmental. Imagine walking into an event that is targeting, say, LGBTQIA people, and there are posters of, known homophobes, right? Like that would be an environmental overt microassault. Obviously racist or discriminatory things that are left in public places, comments. Remember Don Imus called the Black UConn basketball team nappy-headed hoes, all kinds of things that can be said. And then nonverbal include like behavioral discrimination, like hair salons refusing to learn to do Black hair. So the example I give for this is, first of all, when you go to beauty school, you learn how to do all hair. To choose not to learn how to do Black hair specifically, it is a choice. And so even though the person is not intending to harm Black people, when I lived in Michigan, in Ann Arbor for grad school, I walked into a salon that was right across from campus on State Street, and she was like, oh yeah, no, we don't do Black hair. And yet the reverse is not true. Microassaults tend to occur particularly when folks get to be anonymous. This is really important in the age of social media. You find yourself arguing with people online and you realize they've hidden their photo, their social media is locked down, but they are saying really inappropriate things. They often feel that they can say these things because they won't have to be directly implicated in some of the things that they say. Another thing that happens is when folks feel like they're with like-minded people. So you might have a person who is biracial and therefore, or not obviously one particular ethnicity, or maybe they just speak a language, they're fluent in a particular language that someone wouldn't expect them to be. And a group starts talking and doesn't think they can understand, but you hear it. Or I've had folks who are biracial and white passing and have heard maybe a lot of things that other folks maybe assume they felt. So, I'm sure some of you can relate to this. Also, when folks lose control, think of how we talk about Karens. I know we diminish it and we think it's funny, but it is the idea of what a Karen is incredibly dangerous for certain people. When people lose control and certain things, quote, slip out, that's an example of a micro assault. Well, probably more macro than micro, frankly, but it's these intentional things that are still coming from our subconscious, which we'll talk about in a second. Micro insults, comments or behaviors, that communicate to a person that they are some sort of positive exception to the demographic group to which they belong. So, and the perpetuator usually thinks it's a comment. When I first came to Davis, there was a really lovely person who was so shocked that I had a PhD, but she was shocked and then she was kind of conveying it with pride. And I was like, I don't know about that, because the last person in this role had a PhD too. So this is often directly linked to stereotype threat, which we'll talk about in a second. But the micro insults are usually more subtle and then more unconscious compared to the other types of microaggressions. I also think about the stereotype that Asians are good at math. So having an Asian friend who is good at math and then saying, oh my God, you're so good at math, is a micro insult, right? Or, well, I can't play sports, but thinking of what people can play sports and then making those kind of comments. These are often rooted in stereotypes. So with regard to stereotype threat, many microaggressions are attributed to underlying stereotypes that we have about people from specific communities. I just want to keep emphasizing that microaggressions can be harmful, even if they're, just because someone is saying a positive thing doesn't make it not harmful. So stereotype threat, as an aside, is the fear that you might confirm or conform to stereotypes that are held about your particular social group. Stereotype threat actually has been shown to impact test performance by marginalized and vulnerable populations. It causes anxiety because there's a fear of confirming the stereotype. And then also it can impact self-esteem and enhance feelings of imposter syndrome. And they actually have physical impacts. Uh-oh, did I delete that? Oh, maybe I did. They have physical impacts. So if you think about, I think you may have heard of this term by now because it's a little bit more popular, but if you haven't, it's called weathering. So for example, Black people have constant microaggressions perpetuated against them that are often based in stereotypes. And the constant anxiety creates an actual physiological reaction, which has impacts physically on your health, right? Higher levels of stress hormones impact the function of all of your systems. And so we tend to have higher instances of metabolic disorders, right? And this is not just true for Black people, this is true for lots of people. I just use us as an example because I'm Black. But anyway, I bring that up because there's a direct link then between essentially racism or discrimination or microaggressions and physical health. So it's not just that you're saying something and it's a throwaway comment and you can just apologize. It has a lasting impact even after the incident is over. The third type of microaggression is microinvalidations. And these are comments and actions that dismiss the experiences of historically marginalized groups. This can be questioning or doubting someone's experience. So like the way a person might be responding to a person who is expressing their frustration of some issue about race or equity or whatever. For example, I remember when I told one of my friends that I had started dating a girl for the first time, and she said, well, are you gay? And I said, no, I think I'm bi. I'm pretty sure, that's what it is. And she was like, what? You need to choose. And to her, it was like a super throwaway comment. And she probably doesn't even remember saying it, but that's how microaggressions are, because that was almost 15 years ago by now, and I still remember it. So they do have this lasting impact. Another example of a microinvalidation is being colorblind. To be colorblind and then say, I don't even notice your color, is a microinvalidation because my color comes with a historical perspective. And to ignore that is to pretend like none of those things exist, and then we're all just moving forward like everything's okay. And so that has a lasting impact as well. Microinvalidations can also be subtle and unconscious, right? And we're going to talk more about the unconsciousness of microaggressions in a bit. But first, oh wait, where's my video? Oh, okay, just kidding, not yet. So perceptions and impacts of microaggressions, most are so subtle and occur so often that the perpetrators and the targets don't address them. The perpetrators rarely realize they've done it. The targets are just like, bleh, and you just kind of keep it pushing. But there are so many, so often that you just sort of, you wouldn't be able to respond to them all. But because of that, Oh, this is where we talk about health. This can lead to the perpetrator thinking of themselves as good and well-intentioned, but at the same time, they're creating anxiety and depression and other psychological and physiological issues in the target. The innocuous nature of microaggressions can make them really difficult to address because a person doesn't realize that they're causing harm. They really don't take well to being corrected. They're often very defensive. And that also creates a barrier to actually trying to correct the behavior. Their other issues are power differentials, right? It can be really hard for someone who feels like they're in a power differential to try and address microaggressions. So for example, students and postdocs talking to their faculty and research mentors. All right. I love a good video.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John?
Give me shopping
So
advice.
bad I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I touch it,
hair,
please? I wanna touch it. Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So, as you can see, there are lots of impacts of microaggressions. They're emotional, psychological, physical, physiological. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you move forward. So I hope that's helpful. All right, so where do they come from? I keep talking about the unconsciousness of the potential unconsciousness of microaggressions. So they really stem from implicit biases. So implicit biases, which by now everyone has heard, we have beat this term to death. Implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, and our decisions in an unconscious or subconscious manner. They encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments. They are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or control, residing deep in the subconscious. These biases are different from known biases that individuals may choose to conceal for the purpose of social or political correctness. Rather, implicit biases are not accessible through introspection. This is really important because if you can think it, it's no longer implicit. So when we're saying implicit, we really mean deep down in the subconscious. So that knee-jerk reaction, even if you don't actually verbalize it, the knee-jerk thought is the implicit response, right? It's not something that you can actively think about. If you can access it, then it's not implicit. So assumptions can be good or bad, but they're often based on a variety of factors, things that you're really familiar with. I'm sure this group knows, but I threw on here things that you might not consider. Undergraduate institution. This plays a huge role in graduate admissions. So many of you may be familiar with the current move to enhance equity in the graduate admissions process through holistic review methods. We found that faculty who are reviewing undergraduate applications, or excuse me, applications of former undergrads for grad school often will consider the institution they attended, and that actually confers some implicit biases. Also, where a person grew up, people make a lot of assumptions about people when they grew up in certain places. So I just wanted to throw those on there to give you all an idea that it's more than just the usual race, gender, ethnicity, so on. All right, so I did not opt to do breakout rooms because I thought this was going to be a small enough group that we don't need to, and I still think that that's true, but we will use the chat because I love using the chat feature. So think of a time where you either experienced a microaggression, or you might have perpetuated one. I think I just did one this weekend it's never intentional, but I definitely think I did. So here are some examples. These are not my examples. This is someone else's examples, but assumed a woman was straight and wanted to be in a romantic relationship, mixed up two colleagues of color who weren't even the same race, assumed a student was Black, or who was Black was less involved in our graduate program due to lack of passion and skill, and not because the program is crap, said to a male student, "You like sports, right?" So anyway, these are some examples. Hop into the chat, which I'm going to share, and just think for a second. We'll take a few seconds to just think about it. And I'm going to put mine in there because this weekend I definitely made a boo-boo. Alicia. Is it Alicia or Alicia?
Alicia, thanks for asking.
So Alicia, here's a trick for that. This is for everybody. I ask everyone whose name I think I can't pronounce to please spell it out phonetically for me so that I can pronounce it right. I do that all the time because in the past, I was one of those people. Totally get it. Totally get it. All right.
Yeah, and I now ask people to pronounce it, but I love that idea because I find that when I see it out visually, phonetically, that's a great idea. Thank you for mentioning.
I do that especially for our Asian friends who always give us these stupid American names. I'm like, you do not have to, I'm smarter than that. I don't have to call you Amy. I know that's who we are as Americans, but just work with me, friend. Spell it out for me so I can say your name right. I'm not calling you Amy if you don't want to be called Amy. And we have a new person in our office actually who's actually from the Gambia, and told us that their name previously, they went by their last name because it was easier. And we were like, well, what would you like to be called? And they said their name. We're like, oh, okay, we'll just call you that. How about that? So I think it means a lot to people to get their name right. Your name is everything. Oh, yes. Is it Jean? The interruption?
Yes.
Awful. It is awful. Okay. Yes. Okay, so great. Thank you all for participating. I appreciate that. All right. So here's another fun thing that I'm going to let y'all do, and you get to play in the chat. You don't have to be on the spot, but this is going to be, there are 3 scenarios. Where is the microaggression and how would you respond? I'm going to read them out because I understand that sometimes, well, for me, I read slow. So if you just put it up there, I'll get all anxious and sweaty and I won't finish reading. So if you're like me, this is for you. Elaine was an editor for a beauty magazine. She had recently had a breakup, so she did a big chop, shedding her characteristically giant sandy brown curly hair. Shortly thereafter, she took a vacation to Senegal with her friend Chloe, where she got hair extensions, Senegalese twists. She returned to the office with her long, literally past her waistline, hair. Oh, I forgot to put hair. Lisa, her colleague, noticed immediately and shouted, "Wow, did your hair grow? How did your hair grow so fast?" Then, proceeding to touch Elaine's hair, Lisa exclaimed, "Is this all yours?" Where's the microaggression? Ooh, Jenny, I've done that a lot of times. I do that all the time. And I have to go back and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't reply with your right name. Can anybody figure out the microaggression here? Has anybody had this as a microaggression for them? I definitely have before I got locked. It was very annoying. I agree, Tori, it is macro, but it is macro. You have to learn to do the Neo thing. when I first started here, I had plaited my 2 locks, and this woman was like, "Oh, your hair." And I was like, "Wow." And you could just see all the mortified people in the audience. Well, not audience, we were in the office who were like, didn't we just have a whole Solange album on not touching Black women's hair? So super common, super common, super common. So clearly the microaggression is in, first of all, y'all are beauty editors. You should know how hair works. You should know how Black hair works if you're a beauty editor. That's really part of the macro part of this microaggression, that you don't even have a good understanding of hair, even though your job is to think about these things. All right, next one. Oh, we don't even give you the next one right away. Okay, we do have 2 more, so don't worry. So micro-resistance is a mechanism for fighting back. And that's really the part that I care about the most in this presentation, which is giving you a set of tools to be able to fight back and to provide some perspective on what that can look like. So micro-resistances are daily efforts to challenge, incremental daily efforts to challenge white privilege and other privileges based on sexuality, gender, class, etc. They help targeted people cope with microaggressions. Well, they're supposed to. This is not a fail-safe, just so everybody knows. The acronym that's used is called ACTION, and it's a potentially safe way for people to address microaggressions at work or in broader society. So the first thing you can do is ask for clarifying questions to assist with understanding the microaggressors, intentions. For example, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Were you saying blah, blah, blah? Now, it should be noted, specifically me and generally Black people are very snarky and sassy, and we've been being abused this way from birth. So, and part of our socializing as children is to learn how to quit quick. Not everybody does it, but it is part of the socialization. And I think that's across the diaspora. I bring this up because I'm often asked, well, what if I want to get sassy when I respond? If there is no power differential and you want to be sassy, you have every right to. I almost always respond to microaggressions with a sassy, smart remark. So if that's who you are, I support it. You just have to assess your safety and determine how you do that. And that's important because, sometimes there are power differentials, but I can't say that I typically ask, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying in a tone like that. It's usually excuse me, is what you're trying to say, and you know the rest. Carefully listen. Now, if you're not petty and sassy like me, this means something different. If they disagree with your paraphrase, you could just stop talking then, or you can make a statement about their initial comment, which is, well, maybe you didn't mean it that way, but this is how it came off, blah, blah, blah. If they agree with your paraphrase, you can, if you choose, explore their intent further. This is important because, remember, a lot of people who get called on microaggressions really think more about their intention than the impact. And for some people, when you point out that this is your intention, or you point out the disconnect between what your intention was versus what the impact actually was, they are able to reconcile and say, oh, okay, that wasn't what I meant. I apologize, right? So I apologize for hurting you or for offending you, not if, but for hurting you, for offending you. That wasn't my intention. Perfectly okay, perfectly legitimate. It's also okay to tell other people what you observed as a problematic behavior in a factual manner. And I want you to know that I do this all the time. As a diversity officer, I have to point out a lot of things, and that pisses off a lot of people a lot of times. That's okay. I've always been a rabble-rouser. But if that isn't your personality, but you notice an issue and you want to try and fix the issue, or at least get some kind of validation, it's okay to tell other people what you saw. And you can tell them, I noticed that, so-and-so said XYZ, and every time we have this meeting, they say that. I wonder if they know that this is offensive or that this is a microaggression. It's perfectly okay to say that. But tell people, if for no other reason, it's helpful for the validation, because one of the things that microaggressions do is create a lot of doubt, self-doubt, And if you don't have someone else who sees the event, sometimes you take that self-doubt with you away from that scenario, and it can linger for long periods of time. The I is impact consideration. Ask for or state the potential impact of such a statement or action on others. So what do you think people hear when they hear that type of comment? So I'll give you an example. Recently, I was having an event, and I've been planning it for months, and someone inquired with someone else about whether or not they knew the event was happening, as if to question whether or not I had crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. And so I went to that person and I asked them, how did they think that being on the other side of that question would make a person feel? And when they couldn't answer, I said it felt passive aggressive, which is a form of microaggressions. And so sometimes you just have to tell a person a thing. I have a level of professional protection, I think, that I'm allowed to do that. So always be scanning how speaking up might impact you. You do have to own your response. This is important. Own your thoughts and feelings around the impact by using first-person language. So when I asked that person how they thought someone on that side of it would feel, I also said, yeah, it felt very passive aggressive toward me. So this is about me. This is not about the person they inquired to. It's not any of that. This is just about me, how I feel, and what's happening with me. This is important as well when you're acting as an ally. You can't speak for the target. You can speak for what you saw and how it made you feel, and you can get the perpetrator to reconsider how they might have made the target feel, but you do want to speak about your own personal experience. And then the N is for next steps. Request appropriate action be taken. I didn't do that last time. You don't have to do it every time. Microaggressions occur all day, every day, so you can't do it for all of them. But in some cases, you can request action be taken, and you can check in with the target of the microaggression. I'd appreciate it if you stop making these type of comments because blah, blah, blah. Now, I didn't do that the last time, but it is something that, that you can do. So action is the acronym. You can Google it. It's super common. There's lots of data out there around it. So yeah, let's see. All right, we're back to the microaggressions. I don't know why I put them after this, but maybe I wanted to give you a little break so you knew what was happening. All right, Malik and Leela were part of an office party planning committee made up of a total of 9 people. This is a real incident, by the way. I didn't make up any of these scenarios. Malik was the only obviously Asian person in the office, and Leela was the only Native American person in the office. As the committee began to discuss potential icebreakers for the office party, Brian, one of the committee members, suggested the game where staff would bring their baby pictures and everybody would attempt to match the photos with the adults. Can anybody guess the problem with that? I'll just tell you, this happened in my office, and I was like, I'm the only Black person, so I don't want to play that game. But again, this is so subconscious, because who's thinking of that? You're just like, I just want to play a game. But the person who I said it to did say, oh yes, I see why this would be a problem. My bad, which isn't good enough. I'm sorry. I don't need groveling. All right. Sonali had just returned to work from the winter break and was reheating some leftovers in the office microwave. Rachel mentioned that the food smelled delicious and asked what Sonali was eating. Sonali replied that it was Penang curry with vegetables and tofu. At the same time, Pete walked in, and upon hearing not Julius, but Sonali's description of the food, commented, ooh, ethnic food, which I think maybe sounded like a compliment to the person who said it, but it was not a compliment. It was just, you could just see poor Rachel's face go. Anyway, these are the things. All right. Oh, this is a good one. Monique, a relatively young-looking Black woman, was the CEO of a small company. She had arrived to the boardroom early for a meeting that included internal and external executives. Some of those were invited from offices around the city. Monique sat at the head of the table, as was customary for all other CEOs and chairs of the board. While people were chit-chatting, waiting for the meeting to begin, Monique asked the group, "Are we waiting for anyone else?" To which the woman in the seat to her left turned and replied, "Yes, we are waiting for the CEO." Every time I read this, I get so mad. I get so mad. But they're all real scenarios. That's why I get so mad. 3 of them are me, and one of them is not. No, 2 are me, and one of them is not me. Something like that. Anyway, I guess it's my story. The only reason I don't tell the story, like tell that it's me, which ones, is because then you'll know who did it, because it usually was my boss perpetrating this nonsense. And I only had 4 bosses, so it won't be that difficult to backtrack and figure it out. Anyway, this happened. All right. So if you're a target, here are a few tips. Increase your personal and psychological resources and strength through self-care. And I don't mean self-care like spa treatments and that kind of stuff. I mean genuine, deep, thoughtful self-care. So therapy, and making sure that you have a network of mentors who are not attached to your success, but are still professional mentors. So it might be an undergraduate professor who you got really close with, right? They don't have an impact on your career anymore per se, but they can help guide you and provide relief when you experience these things. Also, keep in mind why you're here, particularly in the academy, and that there will be much bigger fish to fry when we're talking about microaggressions. In the grand scheme of things, they are small, but therapy will help you through the reality that you do often have to minimize your experiences. Thinking about it, I'm triggered today, y'all, because the one I told you about just happened like last week, so I'm still a bit triggered. Increase your social resources by participating in mentor programs, particularly ones that are interdisciplinary or that are gaining mentorship from folks who are culturally similar, who have a similar cultural identity. And that doesn't mean that these people are in your field, right? You're seeking mentorship for something other than your research. So that's really important. You want a diverse group of mentors who can pour into you, because these little slights, you saw the little bee stings, they do suck the life out of you very slowly. It's literally death by 1,000 paper cuts. Practice speaking up using the subtle strategy used by the women in the White House during Obama's tenure. And I'm going to show you that in a second. Basically, it was mostly men in the first year of the Obama administration. And the women on the group know how this goes. You have an idea, somebody repackages it and spits it out like it's theirs. And then you never get to speak again, and then whatever. So the female staffers adopted a meeting strategy called amplification. So when a woman made a key point, other women would repeat it, giving credit to its author. This forced the men in the room to recognize their contribution and deny them the chance to claim the idea on their own. This is true not just for the binary men-women binary. This is true across the board. This is a great way, if you have allies, colleagues who are your allies in the group, you can make a pact beforehand to do this thing, to do the amplifying. And one of the folks was quoted as saying, we just started doing it and made a purpose of doing it, and it was an everyday thing, which means that nobody caught on, even though they kept doing that. All right. Tips for allies. Silence communicates approval. So if you see it, especially if the target recognizes that you saw it and you say nothing, that sends a message. It communicates that you're okay with it. When it's feasible, you should interrogate the event with the perpetrator using the ACTION acronym. And I know we talk a lot about, or I've talked a bit about, power differentials, but when you're an ally who is from the majority or the more privileged position, you need to do the speaking up not only when it's safe. And that's true across the board. So my example for you is that in my office, I am a diversity officer, but I have an academic appointment. So my career tracks similar to faculty. I have to do a merit review every year. That confers a measure of protection, a level of protection that people who are staff positions don't have. So I use that to speak up on behalf of those folks. because my position is safe-ish, even though, I mean, maybe I'm irritating leadership a lot more than normal, but I don't really care, right? At this point, the things have to be said. So I'm still a Black queer woman. I still exist in that space, but I do have enough privilege and power to speak up on behalf of those folks who don't have that level of protection. And you do, if it's not costing you anything, are you really an ally? So yeah, I'm annoying to leadership now, but it's all good. What are they gonna do? Don't apologize to the target. It is the most irritating thing on this planet to recognize that someone saw your experience and they're apologizing to you, but not attending to the actual issue at hand. The other thing is, don't ask the target to fix the problem. So for example, if so-and-so is always being silenced by a particular person during a meeting, trying to convince the target to like maybe use a different meeting to speak up, not okay. You don't want to put the onus of fixing the issue on the actual victim. All right. This is just another, is it gonna play? Another video that talks about how to utilize the action. Let's see.
There are several ways that you can address verbal microaggressions if they happen. Here are 5 tips on how you can respond if it is said in your presence. These tips are not intended for only those who are the receiver of microaggressions, but for anyone who is present when a microaggression is said. The first tip is to inquire. If someone says something that you think might be a microaggression, ask them to clarify what they meant. This gives an opportunity for the person to clear up any misunderstanding their statement might have caused, and/or puts them on notice that what was said was not okay with you. The next tip is, if somebody says something, you can always reframe what was said. In this way, you offer a different perspective on how what was said might be interpreted. Reframing works really well when people use generalities. Things like, those kids are always blank, or those people are known for blank. When you reframe, you allow someone to have a gentle reminder that using generalities usually leads to a microaggression. Sometimes you just need to call a spade, so you need to identify the microaggression or call it out directly. When you said, "It was offensive, and it made me feel, and this is not okay with me." If something is said that upsets everyone while having a discussion, diffuse the situation by shutting down the conversation and having everyone take a moment to reflect, preferably in writing. Come back to the conversation only after everyone has calmed and you have revisited the norms established for civil discourse. So the last tip is for you to revisit what was said if you missed an opportunity to address a microaggression. I've had so many conversations where people were in spaces and heard things said, and they're always regretting that they didn't say anything. You know, I was in a meeting and someone said this and I felt really bad and I knew I should have said something, but I didn't say it. What I would say to that is it's never too late to go back and address a microaggression. At the end of the day, you are offering an opportunity for someone else to grow, and that has to be a good thing.
Sweet. So as we wrap up, I just want to challenge you to check your own implicit biases. Harvard has the implicit Project Implicit, which is a test that you can take. There are tons of different implicit biases tests you can take. It's a bold step to do. I recommend folks doing it. You'll be surprised by the results. And then the last thing I have, I know we're about to ask questions, but I think this is a really funny take on microaggressions that came out 1,000 years ago. So hopefully you giggle, but just so you know, after this, it's just a question slide, but I've shared the presentation with you because after the question slide is a series of little vignettes on examples of microaggressions. There's some actors acting them out. So just if you want some more examples, because sometimes it's not always obvious what a microaggression is. This is meant to be funny, so hopefully you'll laugh.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white. of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from?
No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket.
I love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp.
Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my God, so it just does that?
No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round. Like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney.
Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's CHAD, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer.
How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office?
Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this?
I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun.
What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried math. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so
Okay,
I know about
but I
white culture.
backpacked
Okay, it
in
was a
Europe.
So can you say how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular rap song and, like, make it a ukulele song? It's so cool. I think it's so cool how you guys do that.
So, of course, MTV Decoded is way before TikTok, which also is aging me. That's fine. Anyway, thank you all for listening. I know we only have about 10 minutes for questions, but it's been a pleasure. I hope you got a little bit of something. And at a minimum, I encourage you all to keep doing the research, ask questions. You know, it is never too late to learn. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thank you, Devin. That was wonderful. I'm sure many people have questions for you. Let's dive into the Q&A.
Yes.
Alicia wrote in the chat. I can read it out loud.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I get, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dana. Oh, the last video you showed, thank you so much, Devin, for that video. I hadn't seen that one before. And the speaker there highlighted that it was in response to verbal. And so it sparked to my mind this thought of nonverbal microaggressions. And so I was wondering how that differs in your response, but also maybe other examples, because I was concerned, like, if it was a gesture or a facial expression, there might be an additional layer of actually misunderstanding a gesture or facial expression that has a different cultural meaning.
That is a really good question. And I have to be honest, I've been talking about this for years and I've never been asked that, which is weird. But yeah, I think that the response isn't necessarily that different because you're still going to want to essentially, for lack of a better term, confront the person. And so if you're confronting the person, my advice really would be to still go through those steps like, oh, well, you kind of made this face when this thing happened. It conveyed this. I'm not sure if that's what you were trying to convey, but this is how it came across. I think you could still use those things. Where I think there might be a challenge is the environmental ones that are nonverbal, right? And when I think about that, I think one of the ways, because all of you all are in some way attached to research here at the Gladstone Institute, is creating at the beginning of things. So if you have an annual kickoff in the fall or an annual whatever, setting up and presenting like sort of principles of community or rules of engagement to send the signal that these things are unacceptable here. So you end up creating a couple of things when you say, okay, or this is our like research lab bill of rights or whatever it is. You say to the folks who are often the targets that I see you and I'm prepared for what might come your way. You put on alert people who don't recognize that they typically microaggress. You highlight that so that they can recognize it. So now it's coming out of the subconscious and into the conscience. And so maybe they can catch themselves in the act. And it also sends the signal that if these things happen, they will be addressed. It sets the precedent so that nobody is surprised if someone comes up to them to say, hey, you may not have meant to do this, or something like that. So you create an environment where people feel comfortable and safe. And you do that at the outset of things. So a lot of times here on campus, in the orientations, a lot of labs will say, well, here is our rules of engagement in our lab, and here are the mechanisms for correcting behavior when things happen, so that people feel welcome and safe and comfortable. Also, not just speaking up when there's an infraction, but also that people don't feel so kicked when they do it that they feel completely like incapable of change and completely on their heels on the defensive, right? You want people to feel like, oh shoot, I screwed up, but it's all good. Everybody still loves me. Like there's room to make these mistakes. So that's what I would say about that. I saw some things in the chat.
Yeah, I have another question from Janine. She wrote, thanks so much for this presentation. How do we teach the colleagues who don't attend these discussions?
Oh, say that last part again. How do we teach the colleagues who don't attend these discussions? You know, I'm going to be real honest.
Well, I'm asking this because those who often, do the microaggressions, right? They usually do not attend these meetings. That's why I was asking.
That's always the case. And I think it is a matter of amplification, similar to what the Obama folks are doing. So now you all have these tools, and now you have the ability to kind of step in and be the sort of first steps for changing the culture. But ultimately, I'm just being frank, the only way that changes is if it is understood that it will not be tolerated. And the only way to make sure that something feels like it will not be tolerated is to change policies, right? And you can't get to policy change easy in any of these organizations. So my best advice, because of course we deal with that on campus too, the people who come to our mentoring institute are like, they're already phenomenal, right? Like, why else would they choose that? On campus though, people are just waiting for the old heads but that's not effective. People are living longer. It's just what it is. So that's not a really effective strategy. But I think working on creating policies that like institutional policies that say we won't stand for this, and that's fine. You don't have to come to our training, but if you have so many infractions, this is where we are, or if you keep getting called out, you're going to be required to take training. I don't know. There are any number of ways to address it, but there isn't any one way. And yeah, of course, the groups who come here are always the ones who are like, oh yeah, no, I want to be better. The ones who don't come, who aren't busy, and don't have conflicts are like, what? I'm perfectly fine the way that I am. It's a constant struggle.
Well, if there's no more questions, I think I have one before we end it.
Sure.
So you did give tips for targets and bystanders, and I want to know whether you have any tips for us who are unintentional microaggressors, because we've all mentioned that we have done so unintentionally. So do you have any like a quick tip to take away from that?
Humility, humility, humility. That's it. That's it. You just need to be humble about it. If you catch yourself, say you caught yourself, name that mess and apologize, even if the person didn't register it. Because sometimes, well, hell, I'd argue like 75% of the time, you don't even register the microaggression until you've walked away from the interaction. So if you yourself are the perpetrator and you happen to catch it before the other person, you don't want that other person going away lingering, thinking about whether or not their experience with you was, a microaggression. If you hear yourself do it, I catch myself when I say, oh my goodness, that is not what I meant. I really am sorry. So you just have to be humble about it. And I gotta be honest, the more humble you are, it is practice. the more comfortable you feel calling other people out, because then you feel like you can give them the tools to like, I know you didn't mean that. I do it all the time, but in the future, like, be mindful. That is how I do it, how I approach it. I'm sure other people have, lots of thoughts about that.
Okay. Thank you again, Devin, for joining us today. Your talk was very informative, and I think everyone can walk away with something very valuable with their own lives. So please be sure to join us on the next critical conversation in April, where we will focus on the benefits of neurodiversity individuals.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
My nephew is autistic. So I love that we're talking about this more. Also, I should just say that I think that as an adult, a lot of us adults are starting to recognize that we ourselves are neurodivergent, but especially women and girls, we weren't really diagnosed. And so I think that's really important. So I'm happy to hear that. Thank you all for having me. It was a good time, and I'm glad you learned something.